Hey everybody, it is Dan and Chris back with another episode of A Father's Love Healing Through Heartache. We want to welcome all our listeners and thank you all for joining us today. Chris, it's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, buddy. How are you doing?
We're doing okay. We've got some snow coming in today, hopefully, so we're pretty excited around here. We hope that it comes.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you guys get it. Being, both of us being Western New York natives, we're obviously not afraid of snow, and I hope you guys get some snow and have some fun.
Yeah, we're lucky because Erica's dad lives up in a private community at the top of the mountain, so we can go up there and get some real sledding on some good mountain hills on a golf course with not anybody else there. So we're hopeful.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
So
That's going to be great.
yeah. Well, Chris and I, we're super excited because a couple weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to get into a conversation with a local radio station executive in the Brevard area, and it is the station is WMQL Radio. You can look them up on Facebook and on the internet. And in talking with him, he has decided to start airing our podcast weekly on the radio. So that just thrills Chris and I. Chris, what do you think when I was able to share that news with you?
Yeah, I was shocked. It's awesome to be able to keep expanding, our message and getting it out there to more and more people every week. The YouTube viewership has been growing. Our podcast itself has numbers that are growing. As we were just talking before we started this episode, how we have listeners kind of all over the world now. Not a lot, but a couple, and that means something to us. And then to be able to take it into radio and really help out even more people, it's a great feeling, and I'm excited to be part of it.
I know you've been fighting off your fans seeking autographs all week. You can't go anywhere in public anymore, can you?
It's really rough, but I'm making it,
Yeah.
so I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, with that and your good looks, it's just there's no hope for privacy anymore in the Leparty world. So, but yeah, so we want
Well,
to we want to welcome if you are listening in the Transylvania County area through WMQL Radio. We want to say thank you for tuning in, and we want to thank everybody in that radio station for giving Chris and I the opportunity to share our stories and our message and hopefully reach more people. So thank you to everybody associated with that. With that deal and the fact that we're in season 2 and we do have people all over the world actually tuning into our podcast now, Chris and I thought it'd be a good idea if we just kind of reset and go back since we've been doing this for 2 seasons now and just make sure that everybody's caught up with what we're doing and why we're doing it so that hopefully it's crystal clear to everybody listening of what the value is that you can get out of it. So with that, Chris, why don't you? I'll let you start. Why don't you take a couple minutes and just share about your little hero?
awesome. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, thank you again to all the listeners and to the radio station. What an honor for us to have this opportunity, and we hope we don't let you down, and we hope we can help some people out there. So, I'm going to talk about my son, Mason. Mason is my third son, and sadly for us, Mason went to heaven on May 16th, 2020. Um, it all kind of started in the beginning of 2020. I'm in the Air Force. I'm stationed in Delaware now, but I was stationed in Idaho at the time. And it was kind of a rough 2020 for a lot of people. Obviously, the whole world, that's when COVID started, but it was a rough 2020 for our family in specific, uh, the whole entire year. It started off with Mason and his older brother Ryan getting the flu pretty badly. Um, from there, I ended up getting the flu and pneumonia as well. My pneumonia was pretty bad. I was down in bed for almost a solid month without getting out of bed. That's how bad my pneumonia was. Um, Shortly after I slowly started to recover from pneumonia, my fourth son, Carson, broke his femur on the trampoline that we had at the time. And so, he's in not a full body cast, but he can't walk or anything. So still recovering from pneumonia, and you know, dealing with our son who broke his femur. To Mason, he started kind of complaining to us one day that he had some tingling in his legs. We didn't know really what it was. He just seemed kind of a little more than usual. Mason was our most athletic and active child out of my four boys. So for him to be so tired, we knew something was going on. Unfortunately, though, COVID had just really started to hit. So it was almost impossible to get into a doctor to get him checked out. I'd talk to his doctor on the phone, tell him the symptoms. They weren't sure about the tingling, but to them, they were kind of chalking it up as maybe just like some seasonal allergies or something. To be honest, now I'm obviously kind of mad the way it all kind of worked out. If I had those moments again, I would have done things differently. But I'm not a medical doctor, and I kind of rolled with it. And one Sunday, I'm a firefighter by trade, so I was working shift at the firehouse, and my wife called me. She said, our son Mason, he really needs to go to the ER. Something's wrong. She could tell something was not right. So I left work right away, and I took him to the ER. And come to find out that Mason had walking pneumonia, and we had no idea. He wasn't coughing, wasn't sneezing, anything like that. Just a little bit more tired than what he normally was. And he had walking pneumonia. The tingling, they still couldn't put anything on it. They couldn't figure it out. So after we left the ER, they gave him the first dose of antibiotics for ADEM, or for his pneumonia. And come to find out, as soon as we get home, we dropped him off. I went back to the fire station. My wife called me back right away and said it looked like Mason was having a seizure. So I rushed home. She called 911. We got him back to the hospital as quick as possible, and they could not figure out what was going on. We went to Boise Hospital, Boise Children's Hospital, St. Luke's, and the neurologist could not figure it out. They knew it wasn't a seizure that he had. They could tell by the brain waves, but they were not sure what else it was. They did brain scans. They couldn't find anything. So they chalked it up as maybe an allergic reaction to the antibiotics for the pneumonia. And we went home, and then the next morning, Mason had another episode again of what looked like a seizure. And we rushed him back to the ER. He got life flighted from, we were in Mountain Home, Idaho. It's about a 1-hour drive from Mountain Home to Boise. So we got life flighted from Mountain Home to Boise. And what a horrible moment. I wasn't allowed to go in the helicopter with him, so he was all alone flying to the hospital as I'm doing like almost 100 miles per hour down the interstate, trying to get to Boise as quick as I could. We got there because of COVID, right? It's literally probably a month in of really hard COVID restrictions, and only one parent was allowed to be in the hospital. So I'm in the hospital with Mason. Amanda and our other three boys are in the minivan in the parking lot, and they're there all day, almost 8 hours of just sitting in the van. And, as the day went on, the doctors were working hard trying to figure out what was going on with Mason. They finally figured out what it was, and he had a condition called ADEM, which was acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. And it's a rare kind of inflammation that affects the brain and spinal cord, and it's usually in kids. And what it does is it damages the coating that protects the nerve fibers, called myelin. And basically, what looked like a seizure to us was really his nerve endings were being attacked by his immune system. And that's why he was having those symptoms. And they knew what it was, and the prognosis was pretty good. Typically, 85 to 90% of kids that have ADEM recover completely. But as the time went on, Mason's ADEM was getting worse. The typical treatment is steroids, heavy dose steroids to reduce the inflammation in his brain. And we did those for 3 days. And then on the third day, his brain had just swelled too much, and he ended up becoming brain dead. So we had 2 days then to kind of go through the motions and say our final goodbyes. If you want to go back into some of the past episodes, I go into a lot more detail of how all that went down. And yeah, really hard. My wife and I had to make the decision to pull him off of life support because he was brain dead. There was no brain activity at all. You could tell his heart rate was going. Um, there was no brain activity to control the rest of his organs in his body. He was on a ventilator. That was the only thing keeping him alive. His heart rate would jump to 180, down to 60, up to 120, down to 80, and it was just going everywhere. The brain wasn't sending signals, and the body didn't know what to do. So after we had family that flown in, my parents, my wife's family, everyone, the hospital made the exception and let everyone come in. We did all our final goodbyes. My boys did their final goodbyes, and then we had the doctors. We had the doctors take his breathing tube out and carry him to my wife and I, and they left the room, and it was just my wife and I as we held him until he passed away in our arms. So extremely difficult, extremely emotional. That was on May 16th, 2020, when he passed away. He was 7 years old when he passed away, 7.5. And it's been a roller coaster ride ever since. Being in the military at the time, we thought it'd be good. The military will pay for a move for you to get closer to family support. So we moved to Delaware. We're from Buffalo, New York. That's where Mason is buried. And we thought it'd be a good idea to move to Delaware so that we could head home a lot and visit him. And, it's had its ups and downs. One of the things we talked about in our last episode was, and I don't want to, give too much away. I would rather you listen to the episode. But one of the things is when you think moving is going to be best for your family, but it ends up you're going away from all the support you had and the people you knew at the other place. And that's kind of been the hard part for us. While it's been good, we've been able to visit Mason a lot, go to his grave often, visit family at home. It's also been difficult because we're starting from scratch again at a whole new place. So, and that's kind of where, my story ends with where I am right now. I met Dan through social media. We're both from Western New York, and that was kind of our little connection. And we were both on a grief page for losing our sons, and that's how our friendship started. And it just kind of flourished from there. And Dan had mentioned to me that he wanted to do a podcast, and I had already thought about that. I was like, it was something that I wanted to do. I didn't know how I wanted to do it, if I wanted to do it myself. And it kind of just naturally came that Dan and I started working together, and we've been doing this for 2 seasons now. And Dan's been a great mentor to me. He's a little further down the grief, the grief road than I am. So it's good to be able to lean on somebody and that has gone through the experience. And he doesn't even have to say anything because he knows how I'm feeling. I know how he's feeling, and it's just a great friendship. And we wanted to do this podcast so we could help people out. We wanted to be able to, give our experiences because mental health is already a hard topic as it is. And a lot of dads in the grief world don't express their emotions properly. They let it build up, make it worse, harder on their families. A lot of divorce in the grief world. When spouses are dealing with the grief of losing a child, it puts a lot of extra stress on them. So we want to do this podcast, see if we can help other dads out, and this is where we are. So that's my story. We'll get into it a little bit more, but just want to let people know kind of how I started with that. And with that, I'm going to throw it over to Dan.
Yeah, Chris made a few good points with, first of all, we're obviously not professional podcasters. We're two broken dads who were fortunate enough to get connected on a grief page. And the thing that grabbed my attention right away with Chris was that he lost a 7-year-old son, and Jameson was 9 when he went to heaven. So that was an immediate connection where when you're looking for support after losing anybody, there's general grief support that is pretty much everybody goes through maybe the similar stages and things like that, and some of the triggers. But then there's certain things that if you've lost a parent, you can't relate to somebody that's lost a kid or somebody that's lost a sibling, whatever. So it's good that there's the general support, but you need to reach out and find connections for people who are really specifically grieving as close to the same loss as you can, I think, to fully heal. And that's what connected with Chris initially, is that we both had elementary age boys. So yeah, we're not professional by any means. We're two dads who are broken, who are trying to survive and bring ourselves some healing, and that's why we're talking to each other. And then along the way, if we can, like Chris said, if we can help anybody else through their grief, or anybody else who's walking alongside somebody who's grieving, then that's a mission that we're both willing to take on. So that's what started the podcast. My story is a lot, I think, quicker than Chris's. And again, he mentioned, if we're not going to go into all the details. We hope that if you're joining us and for the first time, that you'll go back and just start from the beginning and listen through and find some value in every episode. But we lost our son Jameson. He was 9 years old, and my family moved to the mountains of North Carolina from the Raleigh area in summer of 2018. We wanted to be closer to Erica's dad, and we love the mountains more than we love the city. So we made the move, and we were set up with the perfect life. We had a great house in a great area with Erica's dad there. We could hunt, fish, hike, tube down the river, do all these fun family things that were right up our interest ways, and we had the perfect life. And it wasn't very long until that perfect life became the complete opposite, because in February 26th of 2019, we came home from school, and Jameson and Reese went outside and they were shooting baskets for 2 hours like they did every day. Absolutely perfectly normal, perfectly fine. And we put Jameson and Reese back both to bed at 7:30 that night, like we do every night. And there were absolutely no issues that we had seen, no signs of anything. And an hour later, Jameson was up in our bedroom crying, screaming, and throwing up. And we figured it was just the flu or some normal stomach bug, whatever. And so he and I were set up our sleeping areas out in the living room, and neither one of us slept another second the whole night, because he was sick and I was worried about him, just trying to take care of him. And somewhere around 5 in the morning the next morning, on the 27th, he said that he wasn't comfortable and he wanted to go into his bedroom. So we tried to get him into his bedroom, and he just collapsed on the floor from what I thought was just exhaustion from being up all night. And in hindsight, it was much worse. But so I picked him up, and he was limp, just totally limp. And but I carried him into his bedroom, and I set him in his bed and covered him up and laid down on the floor next to him. And it wasn't very long after that, he just looked at me and said, Daddy, I can't sleep with you in here." And I'm like, "Okay, bud." So I don't even remember if I gave him a kiss, and I don't remember if I said I love you or not. I just know that I at least said okay, and I left so he could sleep. And I went back to my bedroom, got in my bed, and then a few minutes later, Erica went in to check on him and gave him a hug, and he told her he was thirsty. And we were wrestling with the, when your kid's sick, how much food and water do you want to give them, because they're just going to throw it back up. So I think she got him a real little sip of water, and had him on her chest for a few minutes, and he seemed to fall back asleep. Again, in hindsight, not really sure if that's what was going on. And after a few minutes, she sat him up in his bed against the wall, and she came back into our bedroom. And around 5:30 that morning, I went in to check on him again, and I walked in. He was sitting up against the wall in the position I assumed that Erica had set him in, and his eyes were already rolled up to the back of his head. And so I think I'm pretty sure I knew right away that he was already dead. But I pulled him out of the bed and I started CPR on him, and Erica called 911, and they were there super fast. Our first responder lives right across the street from us, so he was there within a couple minutes and came in and felt Jameson that he was already blue, he was already cold, and I don't even remember, but it was like a minute or two, and I looked up or looked somewhere or was saying something to Erica, and I looked down and Jameson was gone, like physically gone. The man had just swooped him up immediately and took him out to the ambulance, and they were hooking him up to everything and taking him to the hospital. And so we got ready, got Reese dressed, and we headed to the hospital too. And the hospital's only about 4 miles away, so it's a short trip, but it's a small town, and it's a small town hospital. And I don't, for the rest of my life, I'll wrestle with the fact of, man, if we were still in the Raleigh area, we would have had access to much bigger hospitals with much better resources. And would that have made a difference? I don't know. But at the same time, the response would have been a lot slower because we were in a much more populated area, and the ambulance wouldn't be right there right away. So it's one of those what if games. Chris and I did a full episode on that early on. You can go listen to it. Just the thoughts that we're going to wrestle with for the rest of our life. And I walked into the emergency room, and they put us in this room, and I just knew that he was already gone because, again, I saw his eyes when I walked in, and how quickly they had pulled him out of our house to the ambulance. I just knew it, and I was just waiting for the doctor to come in and tell us, and obviously hoping for different news, but just knew it. And sure enough, about, I don't know what it was, 30 minutes, 45 minutes later, the doctor came in with his team and said those words. We did everything we could, but he didn't make it. So within literally 10 hours, we went from what we thought was a completely healthy boy to he was gone. And again, there was absolutely no sign whatsoever at any point that Jameson was even sick, much less deathly sick. So we lost Jameson about 5:30, 6 o'clock on February 27th, 2019, and our perfect life in the mountains was suddenly a life of hell in the mountains. And so that's our story. And one of the many things that came out over the next couple weeks was this podcast. That it was a way that I thought it could help me heal, because we need to talk to somebody. And so this is a way to do it. And so I'm thankful that Chris and I connected. I really wish it would have been over the Buffalo Bills or the Sabres or something like that. But unfortunately, we were given this life where our connection is our sons and what we're going to do over it. So, so Chris, with our stories being out there, how did you decide to deal with your grief? I mean, it's understandable that we hide in our houses and we just avoid the world, and a lot of people do that. And if that's what helps them, that's great. But what decisions did you make with how you were going to deal with losing Mason and moving on from that?
Yeah, it was wow, the first 2 or 3 weeks, obviously complete devastation. The whole the whole first year, complete devastation, just crying all the time, hard to think, hard to concentrate, hard to move forward, hard to figure out how I was gonna move forward, how I was gonna keep my family together. The one thing I've talked about in past episodes, and I know Dan agrees with me, is that when you lose a child, or really if you lose any family member, the way your family dynamic changes is a very it's a great change, huge change. Um, you know, losing that piece of the puzzle that you didn't realize. Listen, I love my son. I loved him so much. I still love him. I did not realize the piece of the puzzle he was in our family until we lost him, and how much everything in my house changed now. The way my relationship with my wife changed, the way my relationship with each of my children changed, the way my children changed themselves because of losing him. Um, it was just a huge adjustment. And in order to deal with the grief, um, I go to counseling, and the counseling's been great for me. Mental health counseling has worked for me. Some people it doesn't work for. You have to find what works for you. Um, Faith. I am a religious person, and when you lose a child, it's really easy to start questioning your faith pretty quickly, and not understanding why you were chosen for such a huge burden in life. And so I struggled with that for a little bit, but I feel like I'm getting closer back to where I was before, as time goes on. And yeah, I really wanted, in order to deal with my grief, this podcast was a big piece. And then also, Dan's been a great mentor in the sense of he has a nonprofit organization that he established for Jameson. I wanted to do the same thing with Mason. So I've been working on that diligently, trying to get that up and running. Uh, and so that's really been my goal right now, setting up Miles for Mason Memorial Foundation. And the reason why it's called Miles for Mason is Mason was a huge athletic person. He ran track even at his young age. He had already won a bunch of races. He played soccer. He played baseball. We were about to sign him up for flag football. Just a very, very good athlete at his age. So when Mason passed, even while I was still kind of recovering from pneumonia, my way of kind of dealing with his loss was Miles for Mason. Every day I would go for a run or a walk, depending on how I felt. And I would just post a picture of him on social media with how many miles I did. And I'd say hashtag Miles for Mason. And it's just a memory of Mason on there for people. And I still do that to this day, as a way to keep Mason's memory going. And right now we're working on setting up his memorial foundation, his nonprofit, in order to bring more awareness to ADEM, and so parents understand what the signs and symptoms are. They can bring it up to the doctor, and if they hear some of these simple symptoms, because to be honest, my doctors, they couldn't figure it out for a while, and ADEM is not something that's heard of very often. So if a parent can say, hey, could this be ADEM? Can you look it up? Can we do the brain scans necessary to see? The earlier, the better. And then we have some other things we want to do with this foundation. We'd like to raise money to help kids play sports. If parents can't afford to sign their kids up for sports, we want to be able to help with that. And then the last thing I want to do, when Mason passed away, I had some money in savings, but not enough for a giant funeral and all the associated costs that come with that. So we want to be able to help parents out if they have to, unfortunately, deal with this, help them with some funeral costs. And so those are going to be our three main goals once we get the foundation up and running right now, which we're actively doing, and we're getting closer and closer to meeting that goal. So, and with that, I'm going to throw it over to Dan, let him talk about Jameson's Joy, which was really what inspired me to do mine. So, Dan?
Yeah, and I guess I'll backtrack. I didn't say, I know I hesitated to talk about it for a long time, but Jameson passed away from, it's called a malrotation due to a volvulus, but basically he was born with his small intestine not laying correctly in his body. And from what I can read, and it twisted and it just cut itself off, cut off the blood flow, cut off the digestive process. And from what I read, it like Adam, it's not super common. I think most people probably haven't heard of it. We hadn't, and it the kids that do have it, it sounds like if you know about it early enough, you can have a surgery and fix it. Although the surgery is uh, not very successful enough of the time where even that's not a guarantee. But a lot of kids can survive it if you detect it. But I think, like Adam, how do you detect it? Because it presented itself as a flu. And I wrestled all night with, God, do I take him to the hospital or not, just to get him checked? Because you never know. And it's one of those things I'll wrestle with that guilt my whole life. Even though I think from everything we know and from what the doctors say, even if we had taken Jameson to the hospital immediately at 7:30 that night or 8:30 that night, it was probably too late, because at that point the intestine had already ruptured and the sepsis had already sunk into his body, and it was probably already too late. So um, the the awareness that Chris talks about is hard, because when you go to the doctor, there's no way that they can test for every single disease and disorder that exists in every body all over the world. But obviously you want them to. If it's your kid or anybody, you want them to. It's like, test everything, find out what's going on, and save their life. So it's hard. But Jameson's joy started very quickly after Jameson went to heaven, because one of his buddies from the Raleigh area decided to honor Jameson with an acts of kindness day at school, which gave us the idea to create an acts of kindness day in Jameson's honor. And that turned out to be literally a worldwide thing. We had people all over the world doing acts of kindness on the day of Jameson's service. And again, we hope you'll go back and listen to all the episodes from the beginning, because we addressed each of these things in probably way more detail than anybody wants to hear, but we did talk about them. But on the day of Jameson's service, Erica and I woke up and we were just checking our phones, and our phones were lighting up with text messages and Facebook notifications of how many acts of kindness people had performed before we even woke up at 7:30 in the morning. And one of the tags that we had was an envelope at a local restaurant that some customer had gone and had breakfast and said, hey, here's what's going on today. Do you guys have an envelope? And this person wrote on the envelope Jameson's Joy and just left it there for people to put money in all day. And that and Jameson's buddies honoring him with an act of kindness is what created Jameson's Joy. It gave me the idea that maybe in the hell of losing our child, maybe we can make something positive come out of it. And so we decided right away that we we're going to start Jameson's Joy. Our main initiatives were and still are, first of all, just to spread kindness. The world certainly needs a lot more of that. And if you knew Jameson, you knew what a nice kid he really was. And yes, I'm biased, but you ask anybody that knew him and they will say the same thing. And you know how joyful the boy was. He just was always happy. You could ask him to do anything and he would do it with a huge smile on his face, and he would love it. I mean, even scrubbing toilets, he would get excited about it. So the joy part fit perfectly, the kindness thing fit perfectly. And then our big initial initiative other than the kindness was that we wanted to build a fitness course, an obstacle course, because Jameson and Reese both loved American Ninja Warrior. And again, you could check out our website, go back to listen to the episodes, but short story, the fitness course was built. We raised the money for it. We worked with Transylvania County and got it done. And there's kids loving it every single day, just going out there and playing. And then obviously, with that being done, we've moved forward. We're still doing the kindness push, but our biggest initiative now is working with dads, just trying to get dads connected with their kids, because Chris and I both admit freely what an honor it is to be a father. And nothing gives us more joy. We want to obey God, we want to honor our wives, and we want to be good dads. And being an elementary teacher, I see kids every day that don't have that luxury of having a father figure in their life. So that's our main mission with Jameson's Joy now, is to connect dads with kids. And for the kids that don't have a father figure, we want to provide them with the male role models that can nothing replaces a dad, but we can at least walk alongside them and mentor them and hopefully teach them a thing or two that when they get older, they'll be able to be a better father. So that's what Jameson's Joy is all about. And we wish it didn't exist. I just had a talk yesterday with somebody that we wish the name didn't exist, but it does. So we're gonna try to make the best out of it. And I think one of the huge things that is so crucial about both Miles for Mason and Jameson's Joy is that when Jameson first went to heaven and we were looking at all the different Facebook grief groups and everything, it was amazing the number of people who wrote on there, I'm 20 years in and I still can't get out of bed. And I imagine that that's an exaggeration for a fair number of those people. But the sad reality is there are people in that position that 10 years later, 20 years later, whatever the time frame, they're still not able to function on a daily basis. And Erica and I were just looking at each other talking about that, like, we get it. There's probably nothing like losing a child, but the fact that we're never going to get over it and forget it shouldn't mean that we're crippled by it for the rest of our life. And so we've got to learn to take one step at a time. And that's what we chose to do. And it's hard. It's still hard. We're just over a month from our third anniversary of Jameson going to heaven. But it's still hard to take one step every day. But you've got to take one step every day. And that's another reason why I wanted to do this podcast, is because talking to Chris helps me take a step. Every time I talk to Chris, or hear whether he's helping with advice, just listening to me with my thoughts, or me hearing his thoughts or helping him with some of advice that I can give him, it's one step that I can take to help get farther down that road of healing. And again, if along that way of healing myself, because it's a selfish motive, I want to heal, and talking with Chris helps me do that. But along the way, if I can help Chris heal one step at a time, then I'm glad to do that. And if Chris and I together with this podcast can help one other person take one more step to healing, then that's something that we're willing to do. I don't know if we're glad to do it, but we're willing to do it. And again, if it branches out to helping one person who's walking alongside somebody who's grieving, we're willing to do that. It helps talking about our boys. One big difference, if you go back and listen, you'll notice Chris and I can both talk about our boys now without nearly as many tears as the first episodes. When we shared their stories, there were tears. And we're real, we're raw. But there's definitely been some major steps to healing that we've taken, because we can make it through the stories now without the tears, generally. The tears still come. They will always come for certain events, but they're not as often and they're not as big. And if we can help anybody on that road, or anybody walking alongside somebody on that road, we're willing to do that.
Yeah, great points. And I almost started crying when I was telling Mason's story today, just because I hadn't actually told it in, it feels like a while. I mean, the full story from beginning to end. Um, so even though I didn't get into all the details rushed through my mind really quick, and it was hard to concentrate actually for a second. So, but with that, Dan, why don't you give out the info for Jameson's Joy if anyone wants to check out your webpage or contact you on Jameson's Joy? What's a good way for them to do that?
Yep. So we're everywhere we possibly can be. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it as big as we possibly can and see if we can't help some people. So you can go to www.jamesonsjoy.org. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. Just started a TikTok account. Not sure how big that'll become. Not a fan of TikTok, but if it helps get our message out, then it's one of those things I might have to suck it up. But we're on all the social media at Jameson's Joy. Facebook and Instagram are the two biggest ones that we use. The podcast is on all of the major podcast platforms, Apple, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and a lot more that I don't even know. Our YouTube channel has the video feed that you're very possibly watching right now. But all those ways are ways that you can get on Jameson's Joy and follow us. If you need help, reach out. If you have an idea, reach out. If you want to join us and partner with us in any way, nothing happens without partners in the community, both financially and physically. So we're always looking for support in any way that people want to give it. And I think that's about it. And you can email me at info@jamesonsjoy.org or through the messaging platforms of any of the social media. But we'd love to talk to anybody. Just this morning, we just went out for breakfast, and while I was standing in line at the coffee shop, I was emptying out. We have a money collection tube there, and I was emptying that out. And the guy behind us said, "Here, add this in there too." And so we were thanking him, and I'm like, "Do you know the story?" Because the story is the big deal for us. We obviously appreciate the financial contributions. We can't do what we want to do without it. But we want Jameson's name, we want Mason's name out there, and we want people to know the story. And he looked at me, he said, "Yeah, I do." And that was a special moment because it keeps our son's memories alive. So that's Jameson's Joy. We look forward to hopefully continuing to grow with more followers in more areas and see what we can do to help people. So Chris, go ahead, tell us about Miles for Mason Memorial.
Yeah, so like I said, Miles for Mason kind of developed after learning a lot about Jameson's Joy, and Dan's been really kind of mentoring me in terms of setting up our nonprofit. Same thing, we're not on all the social media yet. We're slowly working towards there. We are on Facebook. If you just search Miles Mason, that'll pop up. And then also his website, milesformasonmemorial.com, and that'll give you some more info. That's also a work in progress. If you need to get a hold of me at all, same thing on social media, on Facebook, you can definitely get a hold of me that way, or Chris at milesformasonmemorial.com. And if you want to come on the show and tell your story, and a lot of our episodes are that, giving dads that opportunity, or even anyone that opportunity that like to just share their story of their loved one. A lot of the people that come on, it's their first time ever telling their full story of what happened to their loved one, and it's been therapeutic for a lot of people to have that opportunity. So we'd love to have you on as a guest if you'd like to come on. If you need some advice on how you can get through your grief, Dan and I say it 100 times, we're not professionals. We're just dads going down this really hard road, but we'll be honest with you and give you our point of view of how maybe you can get to that point where you're feeling a little better and able to move on. Never forgetting your loved one, but able to move on and try to have the happiest life you can, even though they're not there with you. So with that, Dan, anything else you could think of?
No, I think that's a great summary of what we've done on season one and so far in season two. Again, we just encourage and ask everybody to go back and listen from the beginning so you really can understand where Chris and I are coming from, and hopefully find some value in each episode, one little nugget that you can take with you to use in your life. And we look forward. We're excited about continuing to talk and heal together. And again, if you are a listener, thank you for taking your time, because we know everybody's busy. And to just sit down and listen to two guys ramble on for 40 minutes, 50 minutes each week, uh, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for giving us a voice, for helping us heal, because that's what you're doing. Is you're taking yourself out of your own little world, and you're helping at least two other guys heal. And from the stories that we've gotten from some other dads, by you listening and sharing our show, there's a few other guys who have had some major healing from just hearing Chris and I talk about our lives and realizing, hey, I'm normal, and maybe suicide isn't the right decision. It it's a pretty humbling responsibility, but it's a pretty awesome responsibility that, again, Chris and I are willing to take that on if it helps. So thank you. And for everybody that's listening, if you are listening on WMQL radio, do us a favor and shoot them a note and just say thank you. I'm listening. Let them know that the choice they're making to give us a bigger voice is working, because we need more positive in the world, no doubt about it. Let the people who are doing good things know that they're doing good things, and so that maybe then we'll get more good things. All right. But yeah, go back, listen to our whole our whole story for the first season and a half, and join us every week as we continue walking this journey. Chris, I'll let you wrap it up. I think I'm good.
Awesome. No, with that, we hope everyone has a great day. Go Bills. Dan and I are huge Buffalo Bills fans, so go Bills today. They got their first wild card game tonight against the Patriots, so we're hoping they win. And with that, if you need anything, let us know. Otherwise, thank you for listening to A Father's Love Healing Through Heartache.